The cameras had barely started rolling when the atmosphere shifted. What was supposed to be another day in Washington, another hearing that would come and go, turned into a storm that no one could have scripted. Elise Stefanik, the sharp-tongued Republican who has built a reputation on calculated strikes, went head-to-head with Jasmine Crockett, the fiery Democrat whose rise has been as fast as it has been controversial. And in that room, under the glare of blinding lights and the eyes of millions watching at home, the tension ignited into something unforgettable. This wasn't just a debate. It wasn't even politics as usual. It was the kind of clash that exposes the raw nerves of American democracy and leaves the public wondering, who is truly serving the people and who is playing theater? The spark came from a single line, one that cut deeper than anyone expected. Elise Stefanik, with her usual confidence, declared that Jasmine Crockett was nothing more than a performer, an actor on a stage designed to fool the people into thinking she cared. Her words were calculated, almost surgical, designed to sting. But Crockett did not flinch. She leaned forward, her voice steady yet sharp, and struck back with equal force, painting Stefanik as the real performer, a politician who had mastered the art of appearances while abandoning the very people she claimed to represent. The room froze. Lawmakers exchanged uneasy glances. Even seasoned journalists paused their notes, sensing that history was unfolding right before their eyes. It was more than a disagreement about policy. This was a duel of identities, of legacies, of power. Stefanik, the rising star of the Republican Party, carried herself with the weight of experience and ambition, her eyes fixed not only on her opponent, but on the audience beyond the cameras. Crockett, younger, bolder, fueled by raw conviction, embodied the voice of a new generation of politicians unwilling to bow to tradition or hierarchy. Their words collided, each sentence layered with decades of political baggage, centuries of systemic struggle, and the undeniable hunger to shape the narrative of America's future. What made the exchange so electrifying was the way it stripped away the facade. No scripted speeches. No carefully rehearsed talking points. Just two women, unfiltered, clashing over the meaning of public service. Was Crockett the true servant of the people as her supporters hailed her to be? Or was she the face of a political theater designed to entertain rather than govern? Stefanik made her case with biting clarity, but Crockett's defiance carried a raw energy that resonated with those tired of polished lies. The echo of their voices spilled far beyond the chamber. Within minutes, clips were flooding social media, hashtags exploded across platforms, and opinion shows scrambled to replay the footage. To one side, Stefanik had delivered a devastating blow, proving she could stand toe-to-toe with rising stars and silence them with authority. To the other side, Crockett's refusal to back down was seen as courage, a refusal to let the establishment dictate the terms of engagement. And to the millions in the middle, it looked like something far more dangerous. Proof that America's leaders were less interested in solving problems and more invested in winning battles of performance. As the dust settled, the silence in that chamber said it all. This wasn't the end of a debate. It was the beginning of a new fault line in American politics. A reminder that the stage has become just as important as the substance, that theater now competes with truth for the attention of the people. And in that moment, as Elise Stefanik and Jasmine Crockett stared each other down, one question hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Was this democracy at work, or had the nation just witnessed its transformation into something else entirely? The confrontation didn't fade after the hearing ended. In fact, it only grew louder once the cameras carried it beyond those walls. Overnight, the nation split into two camps, each side convinced they had witnessed something bigger than politics, a defining moment of truth. Elise Stefanik's supporters argued that she had peeled back the mask, exposing Jasmine Crockett as a performer using outrage as currency. They claimed her passion was nothing more than a carefully staged act designed to grab headlines and manipulate emotions. Meanwhile, Crockett's base erupted with applause, celebrating her as fearless, a woman who dared to speak truth to power even when the weight of Washington's establishment pressed against her. To them, she wasn't acting. She was fighting, and that fight was long overdue. The media frenzy was instant. Talk shows replayed the exchange on a loop. dissecting every gesture, every inflection of their voices. Analysts leaned in, some framing Stefanik as the strategist who had cornered a rising star, others painting her as a bully punching down on a woman representing new, unfiltered voices. Crockett, on the other hand, was hailed as a disruptor, a representative who could channel the frustration of younger voters disillusioned with politics. But in the storm of opinions, one truth was clear. This wasn't just a personal spat. It was a clash of visions for what leadership means in 21st century America. Behind closed doors, insiders whispered that the exchange was no accident. Stefanik had seen Crockett's rapid rise, her ability to generate viral moments, and recognized a threat. In politics, visibility is power, and Crockett had it. A single fiery speech from her could light up social platforms and dominate headlines for days. For Stefanik, who has ambitions of her own, challenging that power was necessary. The courtroom wasn't just a venue, it was a stage, and she had chosen her moment carefully, throwing down a gauntlet in front of the entire nation. But Crockett, far from being caught off guard, responded with a force that revealed her instincts as a fighter. Her rebuttals weren't rehearsed, they were instinctive, fueled by a raw sense of purpose. For every jab Stefanik threw, Crockett returned it with double intensity. Viewers weren't just watching a debate, they were watching survival, a test of whether a new voice could withstand the crushing pressure of the political machine, and whether the establishment could still intimidate those who dared to rise. On social media, the divide turned into digital warfare. Hashtags carrying both women's names trended for hours. Memes painted Stefanik as a cold strategist, others mocked Crockett as overly dramatic. Comment sections exploded with rage, admiration, and everything in between. It wasn't just an exchange anymore. It had become a national conversation about authenticity, about whether passion is proof of service or simply another form of theater. And while critics accused both women of chasing the spotlight, the undeniable reality was this: they had the spotlight, and they weren't letting go. The most unsettling part wasn't the words themselves, but the silence that followed. That heavy, awkward pause after their last exchange, the kind that makes everyone in the room realize something irreversible has just happened. Lawmakers knew this wasn't going away. Voters felt the shift, too, a crack in the illusion that politics is neatly divided between servants and performers. Because in that moment, it became terrifyingly clear that the line between the two may no longer exist. And that's why the debate between Elise Stefanik and Jasmine Crockett mattered far beyond their personal reputations. It wasn't just two politicians arguing. It was a window into the future of America's political stage, a future where outrage is currency, where performance and service are indistinguishable, and where every exchange is not just a debate but a show designed for millions. In that sense, both women won. Both women lost. And the American people were left to ask themselves, when everything looks like theater, how do you know who is really serving you? The fallout reached far beyond the walls of Washington. What Elise Stefanik and Jasmine Crockett had unleashed was now rippling through every corner of the political landscape. Governors weighed in, senators were asked to comment, and pundits scrambled to take sides. The confrontation became more than just an argument between two women. It became a litmus test for where America's loyalties lie. Was the nation ready to embrace firebrand authenticity, or would it cling to the sharp-edged discipline of calculated strategy? Every word they exchanged now lived on replay, reshaped into narratives that fit the agenda of whoever was holding the microphone. At rallies, Stefanik invoked the exchange as proof of her strength. She described herself as the steady hand against what she called reckless chaos. Her speeches painted a picture of Crockett as dangerous, unpredictable, someone who embodied the very dysfunction voters were tired of. Crowds cheered, their chants echoing with the kind of energy Stefanik had been chasing as she built her national profile. For her, this was more than a confrontation. It was a stepping stone, a way to establish herself as a heavyweight ready for the next stage of her career. Crockett, meanwhile, leaned into her identity as the voice of the people. She replayed the exchange as a badge of honor, proof that she wasn't afraid to challenge the establishment no matter how powerful. Her supporters rallied online, framing her as a truth-teller unafraid of the system's sharpest claws. For them, her defiance wasn't just about Elise Stefanik. It was about every younger voter who felt ignored, every community that felt abandoned, every ordinary American who believed politics had forgotten them. She wasn't just surviving the fight. She was becoming a symbol because of it. And yet, the question lingered. How much of this was real, and how much of it was theater? Journalists asked it bluntly. Analysts debated it on television. Could two politicians truly care so much about the people while turning their every move into a performance? Or was the performance the very proof that they cared, because performance is the only way to be heard in a system drowning in noise? The paradox was impossible to ignore, and it placed voters in an uncomfortable position. Was authenticity found in passion or in restraint? Was true service measured by fiery words or by calm control? Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Insiders admitted that both sides had prepared for confrontation. Not the exact words, not the precise timing, but the posture, the readiness, the sense that fireworks were inevitable. Neither Stefanik nor Crockett walked into that chamber unaware of what might happen. They had both chosen to walk into the fire, which made the moment even more significant because it wasn't an accident. It was strategy colliding with instinct, calculation meeting conviction, and both women knew exactly what was at stake. Not just their reputations, but the story of who they were in the eyes of the nation. The American people, watching from their living rooms, felt torn. To some, Stefanik embodied the toughness needed to rein in chaos, a leader unafraid to call out theatrics for what they were. To others, Crockett embodied the courage to confront entrenched power, refusing to play by rules designed to silence dissent. And to many, both looked like actors in the same exhausting play, leaving the public wondering if anyone in Washington was truly listening. The divide only deepened, feeding into the larger storm of polarization gripping the country. Commentators warned that the line between governance and spectacle was vanishing. If every hearing, every debate, every exchange becomes another viral clip, then the purpose of politics shifts. It stops being about solving problems and starts being about capturing moments. And in those moments, leaders like Stefanik and Crockett don't just argue policy. They fight for dominance in a theater where perception is everything. That is what made their clash so unsettling. It wasn't simply about who won the argument. It was about the creeping realization that politics itself has changed. That the chamber is no longer a place of resolution, but a stage where power is measured in applause, retweets, and viral sound bites. And if that's true, then the future of American democracy looks less like a government and more like a performance. One where the actors are polished, the scripts are blurred, and the audience is left to decide whether to cheer or to walk away. The aftermath didn't end with the headlines. It seeped into dinner-table conversations, late-night talk shows, and the private halls of power where real deals are struck. Elise Stefanik and Jasmine Crockett had not only clashed in front of the nation, they had set the tone for what American politics is becoming. And while their words faded into transcripts, the impression of that confrontation lingered like a scar, etched into the memory of every voter who witnessed it. Because in that heated exchange, people saw more than politicians. They saw reflections of their own frustrations, their own questions, their own doubts about whether this system is still capable of delivering what it promises. Stefanik emerged from the confrontation with sharpened edges. To her supporters, she was the warrior who stood tall against chaos, the strategist who never flinched. She became a rallying figure for conservatives who wanted discipline, order, and control. Every time she spoke afterward, the confrontation was invoked, sometimes directly, sometimes as an unspoken reminder of her strength under fire. She knew it too. Every move she made carried the weight of that moment. In her world, the clash had not weakened her. It had cemented her role as a force that demanded to be taken seriously. For Crockett, the story was different but just as powerful. She leaned into the fire, embracing the identity of a fighter who would not bow. To her, the confrontation was proof that she belonged in the room, that no amount of institutional pressure could silence her. She became the voice of younger voters, of communities tired of waiting for respect, of people who believed politics had ignored them for too long. Each time she retold the story, each time her supporters shared that viral clip, she wasn't just defending herself, she was building a movement. But outside of their camps, the rest of America watched with unease. They saw the passion, yes. They saw the conviction. But they also saw the performance. The way words were weaponized, the way silence was calculated, the way every gesture seemed designed for maximum impact. It raised an uncomfortable question. Was this truly a fight for the people? Or was it just another act in a play where the audience keeps buying tickets but never sees a different ending? Historians will look back on exchanges like this one as more than isolated incidents. They will mark them as signs of a deeper transformation in the way politics operates. Once, debates were about persuasion, about substance, about policy. Now, they are about dominance, about spectacle, about moments that live online longer than they live in memory. Elise Stefanik and Jasmine Crockett were not just opponents. They were co-actors in a performance America couldn't stop watching. And that is what made the clash both magnetic and dangerous. Because if politics has become theater, then who is writing the script? Who decides the roles? And most importantly, where does the audience, the American people, fit in? Are they the true beneficiaries of these performances, or are they just spectators paying with their trust, their attention, and their votes? The line between servant and actor has never been thinner, and this confrontation proved it. In the end, there was no clear winner. Stefanik and Crockett both walked away stronger in some ways, weaker in others. But what they left behind was a nation more divided, more skeptical, more aware that its leaders are no longer just lawmakers. They are performers on a stage where the stakes are nothing less than democracy itself. And until that curtain falls, until someone breaks the cycle of spectacle, Americans will be left asking themselves the same haunting question. Are we watching servants of the people, or just political theater dressed up as democracy?